So 109 Mics is a channel where I'm going to be doing just kind of unscripted stuff and shit posts like this dumb mucore albums tier list. There's no better way, dude. New mucore tier list. They had to put the tiers twice. Hopefully I'll be shedding some tears when we're done with this list. So okay, so we're doing the mucore tier list because I think a lot of people... Oh, damn it, I clicked on something that I didn't mean to click on. So I think a lot of people who follow me are probably familiar with, you know, at least one or two of these albums because, you know, they're pretty talked about on the internet, which you're probably using to watch this video unless you're, like, watching it on a cassette or something. So we're going to start just in order. We're going to do it this Daughters album. The first one, yeah, this is the new one, so it's like new and improved with all these modern ass albums, although I think this is actually the most recent one, it appears. This is like a solid B tier, I would say. Definitely, like, it's Fantano core as fuck, but it's like, you know, one of the better ones. It's like this noise rock album that's really kind of scary and spooky, but it's really catchy at the same time, and so it's kind of like using the catchiness to sort of trap you into this environment of fear. Pink Floyd Animals, believe it or not, I believe is probably the best Pink Floyd album, at least like 70s Pink Floyd. The best Pink Floyd album is in this list. I do see it. I won't spoil what it is, but you can probably figure it out. This is the best 70s Pink Floyd album, in my opinion. It's the most progressive one, has the most interesting songs. I think Dogs is amazing. So I'd probably have to give it a solid A tier for that. Wish You Were Here, on the other hand, is pretty fucking terrible, so we're going to put that in F tier. I'm just kidding. It's decent. I'll give it a C, you know. It's very kind of more atmospheric, you know, the progressions in the songs are a lot slower, which I appreciate. It's definitely on the higher ups of Pink Floyd albums, but, you know, not as good as Animals, you know, or, you know, the other one, which is down here, that I won't spoil what it is, what the best Pink Floyd album is. But you could probably guess. Okay, so for Atrocity Exhibition, I'm going to have to actually add a new tier. I have to add a row above it. The super duper tier. Because Atrocity Exhibition is so good, but it's not that good. So it's just S tier. You know, it makes you feel like you're on drugs. I know that's like the most cliche way to describe this album. It's basically just become the this game makes you feel like Batman kind of thing. Like, but for albums. But, you know, it's good enough. Merryweather Post Pavilion, not the best Animal Collective album by any means. I really don't know why it's like I guess it's the most poppy. It's like the most accessible one, or one of the most. They have probably more accessible albums than this at this point. But, you know, pretty good album nonetheless. Definitely has some bops on it. But, you know, it's, you know, we really going to say it's in the same league as, like, Spirit They Vanished, which I don't think, it doesn't look like there's any other Animal Collective on here. Oh, no, there is. Spirit They Vanished is right there. We'll get to that eventually, though. So Donuts by Jay Dilla, I think, is actually the greatest album ever made, and that's not even, like, a joke. I think the way that album... So it's, like, 31 tracks, and the way each track kind of represents a year in Dilla's life and just kind of encapsulates all these emotions that encompass the human experience is pretty stunning. So I do have to give Mr. Jay Dilla the super-duper tier. And then we got Freddie Gibbs and Madlib's Pinata. Madlib is still killing it after all these years, man, let me tell you. But Freddie Gibbs, you know, he's pretty cool, so we're going to put that in, like, B tier, I'd say. Closer by Joy Division is one of my absolute favorite albums of all time, so it deserves to be right next to the album that actually, these two together is kind of like fate. Like, this, because this album, in case you didn't know the lore, is actually named after the first song on here, and there's a sample from the first song on here on this album. But yeah, this is definitely my favorite of Joy Division's two albums. It's has this bigger sound that the other album doesn't have, that Unknown Pleasures kind of lacks. But Unknown Pleasures is kind of just more like dark and sad, but it's like really catchy and upbeat at the same time, which is kind of mesmerizing. But, you know, Closer is something else. It's even better. I don't know if Unknown Pleasures is like on here. Oh, there it is. We'll get to that when we get to that. Long, pretentious, artsy-fartsy bullshit. A tier. David Bowie's Low, I'd say, is actually the best David Bowie album. I love how the A-sides kind of just like these little separate little, I guess you could call them vignettes or whatever, just like these small songs that kind of feel like they could be part of a bigger whole, but yet they come together into this really interesting kind of collage of sorts. And then the B-side has kind of these more ambient tracks that are made by Brian Eno. So I do have to give some respect to David Bowie, and I'm actually probably going to move Lift Your Skinny Fist down a little bit. I'm sorry to all the Lift Your Skinny Fist fans out there that are going to put it in the super duper tier, but that's that. OK Computer, I think, is the best Radiohead album. I know that that's, like a super hot take, but I'd probably put it in, I'd say it's A tier. I think OK Computer, I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's the most overhyped album in the world or whatever, but, it was a really big breath of fresh air for alt rock and stuff at the time, and I still think it holds up. I still think it's a very enjoyable album with a lot of really memorable songs. I love Let Down, especially. I'm saying this right now, pretty much every post-rock album that came out in the 2000s is just like a 20-minute version of the song Let Down from OK Computer, and that's, I think, the greatest contribution that this album had to the world, for better or for worse. King Crimson's Red is a classic. I don't really listen to it that much, even though King Crimson is now on streaming, but it is a great album every time I listen to it. I'm not really coming back to it like I am, Court of the Crimson King or anything like that, but it is, one of their better albums, so I do have to put it in B tier. Sorry I don't have like a super detailed explanation as to why King Crimson's Red is in B tier, but, that's just how life is sometimes. Life of Pablo, honestly, is not one of my favorite Kanye albums. This is kind of, the Kanye stans might get on me for this, but, like, College Dropout, Late Registration, and Yeezus are, like, really the only Kanye albums that I even, like, give a shit about at this point. So, I'm sorry to all the Life of Pablo fans out there. It is, actually, I'll put it in D tier. It's not quite E level, but it is E level. Dilate. No, I'm just kidding. I'd put Dilate in D tier too. Dilate's good, but like the whole gimmick of Dilate wears pretty thin pretty quickly for me. It's like, every song kind of, it's almost like Atrocity Exhibition, how everyone's like, oh, the album makes you feel like you're on lean or whatever. But, that's kind of just a cop-out excuse. Like, it's, it's a catchy album, but, like, you kind of just realize that every song is exactly the same after some time, and it's like, oh, it's like, do I even need to keep listening to it? This is the Lark's Tongue, Aspic, whatever, weird King Crimson album that's a little bit of a stylistic change of pace. Again, I don't really revisit it that much like I do Red. I don't really listen to it that much, even though King Crimson is now on streaming. I would put it slightly below Red, but I think it's, Also, I'm not really doing, like, the order of, like, ooh, this album is higher than this when it's, like, closer to the S. Like, I don't care about that. Like, it's all the same. All the same to me. F sharp, A sharp, Infinity is also probably C tier for me. I know there's a lot of fans of this. A lot of people actually like this more than Skinny Fists, but I don't know. There's a lot of talking on there. David Bowie, Black Star. Excellent David Bowie album. Definitely kind of a chilling way to escape, or a chilling way to leave off this world. But I mean, donuts, No disrespect to the man David Bowie for putting out such an existential album right before his death, but like, we're not going to ignore the fact that Jay Dilla did it first and better, so we're going to put it in C tier. White Light, White Heat by the Velvet Underground is absolutely incredible. I'd probably have to put it in A tier. I think that the 17-minute song, what's it called? Sister Ray, that one. Dude, that song is like one of the greatest songs ever made. Court of the Crimson King does have to be S tier. It's just, dude, the cover art alone, like, makes it B tier at least. Like, if the music on here was absolutely terrible, then, like, the cover art would still put it in B tier, but, like, the music is also very not terrible, so it goes in S tier. Selected Ambient Works, the first one, is, like, one of Aphex Twin's, I'd say, lesser albums. Like, I'd probably rank it at, like, number 4 of his, like, 6 main, like, studio albums. But it is the one that people talk about the most for whatever reason. I think it's just because it's, like, the first one, so it's, like, the classic. It's, like, this is the first IDM album, which I don't know if that's even true or not, if it's, like, really the first. But it's, like, a solid enough album for what it is. I'd probably put it, like, in D tier just because we're comparing it to, like, some of the greatest albums of all time. But, it's good. If Volume 2, it doesn't look like Volume 2's on here. Volume 2 would get an easy super duper. That is one of my favorite albums of all time. Beach Boys' Pet Sounds. Well, it's actually not really Beach Boys. It's actually kind of just Brian Wilson and his Magic Band. And the Magic Band is Brian Wilson. It's Brian Wilson and the Brian Wilsons. But, definitely classic kind of Baroque pop album for the 60s, which, believe it or not, when this album came out, everyone hated it because it was, like, too weird and too experimental, which is weird to think about because the Wouldn't It Be Nice song was in the trailer for some Battle Royale game or something recently. So I think because of that, we have to put it in B tier. Velvet Underground and Nico, I consider this the greatest rock album ever made at one point in my life, but now I just think it's an F tier. No, I'm just kidding. It's not F tier, but it's... I'd almost put it in S. It's S. You know, it's the Velvet Underground, Nico. Of course it's S, you know. It's what can I even say? It like laid the groundwork for all underground rock. It's basically like what The Shape of Jazz to Come is for jazz. Like that's what this album is for like rock music, basically. 36 Chambers really isn't even that much on like the higher ups of my Wu-Tang album ranking, at least when we're talking like solo members and like the whole Wu-Tang lore. If 6 Feet Deep was on here, that would be an easy super duper, but you know, Wu-Tang, well, this is a good one, you know, definitely has all the classics, has all the bops, you know, it's got Cream, it's got Protect Your Neck and all that good shit. I Love Supreme is also one of the greatest albums ever made. Dude, this album, you know, if I was like addicted to heroin, I would be cured of my addiction. Just from hearing the album. Queen is Dead, more like my freaking ears are dead. D tier. Frank Zappa, Hot Rats. Not like my favorite Frank Zappa album, but Frank Zappa is one of my favorite artists of all time, so I do kind of have to put it in like put it in B tier, you know. Whenever I ask somebody like their favorite jazz album, my absolute favorite response is does Hot Rats count? And so because of that, I have to put it in B tier. Unknown Pleasures, you know, we were just kind of talking about this earlier. I love the way that the riffs on this album are kind of able to sound like happy and sad at the same time. It's just so melancholic, yet it's so poignant at the same time. I'm just kind of using all the artsy-fartsy kind of dumb adjectives to describe it, and it's so amazing that I'd have to put it in B tier. You know, probably B tier. Maybe A, but maybe B. Yeah, I think it's B. Sorry. Ziggy Stardust. It's kind of amazing that this album is so relevant today, or that it's like the most talked about Bowie album, because it's like so of its time. It's kind of just, the whole thing is basically just kind of a satire of like, you know, glam rock and stuff like that. Like it's this super ridiculous rock opera type thing, but it just has all these hits on it that people love to listen to. Still, you know, and definitely, I mean, I think concept albums in general are overrated. I think people are like, oh, it's a concept album, which, you know, immediately makes it better than other albums. But really, you know, any album could be a concept album if you think about it long and hard enough. Black Saint and the Sinner Lady also has to be in super duper tier. I want to cry and dance at the same time when I listen to this. Blonde on Blonde is incredible. I absolutely love it. It's a beautiful album. Even with Bob Dylan's super weird voice, it's still beautiful, and it doesn't take me out of the music. I think it adds a lot. It builds a lot of character. You know, double LP, the D side, the last song, Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands, is one of my favorite songs of all time, and I actually have a 1970 pressing of this album. But unfortunately, the D side kind of sounds like shit. But you know, you get what you pay for. Because I actually paid like not that much for it. Travis Scott's Rodeo, a bit of an overrated album in the trap sphere, because it's like the first time anybody heard like melody in a trap song, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is brilliant." But still solid enough. Put it next to David Bowie's Black Star. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is pretty solid. Definitely a very well produced album. But the thing is, okay, Yeezus is on here, right? All right, I'm just gonna skip to Yeezus right now. Yeezus does what My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy wanted to do, like better than My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Yeezus is like S tier, first of all, because Yeezus is basically Kanye kind of just showing that the ego has kind of taken over his whole existence, and just like art and having to make art for a living all the time has kind of just taken over his whole existence, and so he shows his own kind of ego in this way that's very exaggerated, but it's also kind of realistic at the same time. Whereas My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy is kind of just like, oh, I'm so famous, my life is so hard because I'm so famous. But then Yeezus, it's like you feel it on a level that's like funny, like you're laughing at him, like you're laughing with him, but at the same time, it's kind of like, oh shit. So My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy's probably got to be in D tier next to the Smiths, and you know, Pink Floyd's got to be in S tier next to Yeezus. Astral Weeks. Gotta be honest, I've never really been a big Astral Weeks guy. I don't know what it is with this album, because I'm a sucker for like that folk stuff. You know, I love good old Bobby D. You know, I don't think Elliott Smith's in here, but Elliott Smith is my favorite artist, even though he doesn't really make stuff that's really like these two at all. But I don't know, just never been a big Astral Weeks fan. I can't even really explain it. It's like a good album. Like, I'll acknowledge the quality, but it's just never really did much for me. So I'll probably put it like in D tier. Mr. Thug Isolation is a brilliant album, absolutely brilliant. I think I talked about it in like a video I made about like musical satire or whatever, more recently. Actually, Pink Floyd, they're gonna have to move down to A. I'm sorry. You know, this is the best Pink Floyd album, but it's still not on the same level. You know what? Yeezus maybe has to move down to. You know, I think I'm just kind of, I'm definitely kind of reactionary with these tier lists. I kind of just like to have more absurd reactions, like putting American football in F tier, just because you know it's fucking American football. Same with Arcade Fire, you know. Okay, I'm just kidding. American football's good. It's definitely like kind of laid the groundwork for the whole Midwest emo revival stuff. But like the revival stuff is better than like most of what's on here, honestly. But you know, solid enough. D tier. Arcade Fire is good too. You know, it's okay. It's okay. We'll put it in D tier. Bitches Brew, you know, definitely a big album for jazz fusion. Very long album. It's kind of, you know, 2 hours long, but it kind of lives up to that time. You know, there's other fusion albums that I'd listened to before Bitches Brew, even other Miles albums. You know, I'm more of an On the Corner fan, personally, but you know, Bitches Brew, got to acknowledge that it is a classic. Love the way it kind of fuses this psychedelic rock with jazz and kind of these huge songs. Definitely a classic. Black Sabbath's Paranoid is kind of just like a pop album disguised as a heavy metal album, but sometimes that's all you need in life. B tier. Death Consciousness, you know, kind of this really interesting fusion of like shoegaze and post-rock and just this very depressive album. You know, there's other albums that are depressive that I kind of tend to gravitate towards more than Death Consciousness personally, but still a very well-done album. Put that in B tier. Future Days isn't my favorite Can album, but my favorite Can album is on here. This is a super duper album. This is like one of the greatest rock albums ever made, if not the greatest. I'm saying it straight up, dude. The progressive song structuring on here, I love. I can't think of the drummer's name, but the drummer, like his approach to rhythm and all these songs is so interesting. I love all the guitar work and just the strange vocals and stuff. It's such an incredible album that I can't get enough of. Future Days is pretty solid though, so I'll put that in B tier. Blonde is good. Wasn't entirely expecting to see Blonde on this list, but it's a very good album. Put that in C tier next to Travis Scott. You know how I said that OK Computer's the best Radiohead album? Well, I wasn't lying. I'm putting this in C tier. I'm just kidding. It's B. I'm just kidding. It's A. You know, it's about as good as OK Computer. Really, the Holy Trinity. You know, we could just throw Kid A up there too. Why not? You know, let's just have them all together. You know, it's just a big happy family. Remain in Light, absolute classic. I love their approaches to rhythms on this album and the way that they sampled and looped themselves was pretty revolutionary for the time, actually. You know, I'm more of a Fear of Music kind of guy, but still A tier. Nas Illmatic. You know, I know it's kind of become a trend to like hate this album for whatever reason, and there are other albums, other rap albums from the 90s, and really even 1994 that I think are better than Illmatic. That kind of take it a step further as far as production goes. But it's really just kind of about how raw and just how no filler, all killer this album is. That kind of makes it land so high on a lot of hip-hop album lists. So, you know, it's a great album. I'll put it in B tier. In the Aeroplane Over the Meme, you know, this is kind of like the holy grail of like, you know, hipster albums. And because of that, I do have to put it in B tier. Dude, I'm still in shock that my man Doom died. Like, Doom is like my favorite rapper ever. So, you know, this album is super duper tier. We can't exclude the villain. Okay, gotta be honest, I'm not a big shoegaze guy, but I do think Loveless is pretty incredible. I love how noisy it is. I love the way it kind of explores the shoegaze genre in kind of just as many ways as one could for the time. Because really, I know it's not the first shoegaze album, but like it may as well have been with just how much it explores the genre in just all these different ways. There's songs that are like catchier, and then there's songs that are more noise oriented, songs that are more ethereal, you know, to use the most cliched word in music criticism. But yeah, I mean, it's Loveless, man. Come on. Nick Drake's Pink Moon. Oh, buddy. Ooh, buddy. Pink Moon. You know, I'm gonna have to make another tier. Gonna have to add the better tier. This is just the best stuff right here. Yeah, I think Donuts is in there. I think Love Supreme. I could just move up all these albums, honestly. I put them here for a reason. You know, on second thought, I'm just gonna pretend I didn't do that. Not available by the Residents. On second thought, I might have to put Not Available higher than all the others, because Not Available is like one of my favorite albums of all time. I'm happy to see that on here in the midst of all these kind of more known albums. I feel like this one doesn't get talked about nearly as much as all these other ones, but Not Available is absolutely incredible. It's this really strange concept album. It's almost like a love triangle type thing. But it just kind of feels like you're watching like this really surreal play from another world, and I find it absolutely mesmerizing. And I love the musical motifs and just how subtle they are. There's like this really subtle motif that you hear on the first track, and it kind of appears throughout the album, really in like every section of the instrumentation. And, the vocal performances, I know some of the strange and more, I guess you could say, kind of cartoony vocal performances may be off-putting to some people, but I absolutely love it. Revolver is pretty good. It's, not my favorite Beatles album, but it is one of the better Beatles albums. I'm probably going to put it in C tier next to Frank Ocean. Okay, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of this band, because if I do, I don't even really know what this album's called. To be completely honest, I haven't heard this album in such a long time. I'm not the biggest post-rock guy, but it is one of the better post-rock albums. There's a reason why it's talked about so much. Spiderland is another S tier, maybe not quite the super duper tier, but it is one of the best albums ever made. I mean, just such a creative, such a forward-thinking approach to post-hardcore almost. It's kind of like a post-hardcore album, but it kind of really encapsulates kind of just all these different sounds of angsty 90s rock, but in this very experimental, but yet not too alienating lens. But the way that it has kind of these math rock stuff, and the way it kind of combines that with spoken word and just these huge explosive hooks as well. Absolutely brilliant. From front to back, it's 6 tracks, and just every song is absolutely incredible. Soundtracks for the Blind is okay. I liked it a lot more back in the day, but then, I don't know, the more I listen to it, the more I kind of realize it's not as incredible as I thought it was when I first heard it. Still very good, still probably the best Swans album, unless you're kind of more into that no wave stuff that they're into. I don't know what's with this kind of broken, it's Doge. I didn't even notice that. But yeah, no, Soundtracks for the Blind. That Volcano song that's on there, that's a dance song, is super weird, and I absolutely love that. I think that's probably the best song that Swans has ever even made. But there's some other highlights on there as well. There's that one really weird song with that girl's voice, and she's like, Spirit, They're Gone, Spirit, They Vanish, easy S tier. This thing is the most creative noise album. I'd call it a noise album almost, but it's psychedelic noise, if that makes sense. It's a noise album, but it's psychedelic, and it kind of takes that and kind of forms it into more, there's more conventional songs on there for sure, but the vocal performances are all really weird too, and it kind of has these really harsh acoustic sections in the background, but there's straight up noise tracks as well that I think are absolutely brilliant. To Be Kind is fine. Probably put it in C tier. It's a fine little post-rock album, some nice crescendos and stuff on there, some cool vocal performances. It's good. There's a lot of good songs on there. I love Oxygen. I love, Little God in My Hands, or whatever it's called. A lot of good songs on here, but some of the longer tracks, some of the 30-minute ones, just don't really hold my interest as much as, Live for Skinny Fists, or, even some kind of Drone and other post-rock bands. There's no Natural Snow Buildings in here, unfortunately, but that's an example. I got the powers that be. Oh, sorry. Really sorry that you had to hear that. The Powers That Be is easily the best Death Grips album, by a freaking mile. And that's not even dissing their discography. They have an incredible discography, but the Powers That Be is just so, the way the first disc kind of has these rhythms that are incorporated on Björk's voice, is just feels such a step forward for hip hop and glitch hop especially. And then the B-side is just this really incredible, really well written, well composed noise rock album pretty much. It's definitely kind of a step outside their usual comfort zone, but I think it's their magnum opus easily. That's their masterpiece. Tom Waits' Rain Dogs is another album that I'm gonna have to put in S tier. Every single song is a scene in a Disney movie or something. The way that Tom Waits is able to just kind of construct these entire universes within individual songs and kind of just play these characters is just absolutely brilliant. And I think that every single song on Rain Dogs kind of just shows that off tenfold. It's really this is definitely his best album. I know a lot of people love Swordfish Trombones, and some people even love kind of the later years of Tom Waits, or the earlier years when he's kind of doing the more conventional songwriter-y kind of stuff. Trial Mass Replica is an album that I think it's a very good album, but I think people take it way too seriously. I think the people who praise this album will say stuff like, "Oh, it's the polyrhythms. Oh, the polyrhythms. It's so complicated. Blah 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 blah." Like, sure, but at the same time, it's just a really funny album. I think the whole thing is just really hilarious. It's like kind of one of those really weird, surreal, like Adult Swim shows or something. You know, it's like the 12-ounce mouse of like albums, and I think that that's absolutely wonderful. That's really kind of just where my enjoyment of the album stems from. I do think it's a bit long. I do think if it was a single LP, I'd probably rank it a little higher, but regardless, you know, I think it's good B tier. And then we have Close to the Edge by Yes, one of the best prog albums of all time. Easy A, you know. Not much really to even say about it. It's just a very good prog album, very well written music. You know, we didn't end up using these two tiers. You know, maybe I'll just put this here to, you know, piss off everyone in my audience, but yeah, here we go. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to leave that there. All right, this is the ranking. Yeah, that's all. Bye.